Hey, I'm Mark.
And I'm Kristi.
And this is a podcast about everyone's favorite show,
Friends! We've been fans from the beginning, and we're here to break down the episodes.
That's 10 seasons.
All the funny lines, hilarious situations, and how the show has influenced pop culture for over 25 years.
We'll look at how our friends bonded,
How they grew up before our eyes.
and maybe even how we grew up along with them.
And I know we'll have a lot of laughs along the way.
This is The One with a Podcast. Hey, welcome to The One with a Podcast. I'm Mark, and I'm here with my real-life friend, Kristi, who I'm pointing at in a computer screen. Say hi, Kristi. You can wave at me,
Hey,
but no
everyone.
one will see you. And what is this all about? Like, why are we even doing this? This is really a podcast about the show Friends. Kristi and I have been fans of this show probably since it started, and then just got deeper and deeper into it. And still, it's still, if you're a Friends fan, you understand that the love is deep. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, the love is deep.
Like, I don't even know how many times I've seen this show. I can't say that I've ever watched it all in a row. It's not like I can say, oh, I've seen this, 70 times or whatever. But it's to the point where we know basically the gist of every episode. Again, any true Friends fan would be like, that's the one where this happened. Which, ironically, that's the way they titled these episodes. But so, yeah, we're here to discuss Friends episodes. And I know that there's lots of podcasts out there that exist. And we want to give a shout out to them. And we'll highlight one maybe like every episode as we go along. Just because we've listened to a few of them and they're entertaining and they've taken their own spin on whatever they do. And we're going to take our own spin. So if you join us and stick with us, we'll love you for it. That's all it takes for us to love you.
Yeah, that's all it takes to love you.
Why don't you like me? Anyway, so we're just going to start. Since this is the first episode, Kristi and I decided that, why don't we discuss the first episode of Friends, which originally was called The Pilot, but over time, they've renamed it.
Yeah, it's morphed into different kinds of things. I guess when the DVDs were released, it morphed into the one where Monica gets a roommate.
Right.
And then as time went by, and I tried to do some research on it and figure out when it happened, but I think it must have happened maybe with TV Guide. It was changed to the first one or...
Right. The one where it all began.
Where it all began, yes.
Yeah. But it's funny because on my DVD set, at least, which I think it's the first one where they release the individual seasons, it is just called The Pilot. There's no label anywhere else of the other titles. Does yours say something different?
I should have checked mine. I didn't.
I happened to look at it when
mine.
I was looking, but it's funny because I don't think I remember reading the one where Monica gets a roommate. I don't remember that. Even until we started talking about doing this, I was like, oh, that's what it's called? But I totally remember the first one, or the one where it all began. That's what happens in a pilot, I guess. Because, what did we decide to call this episode of ours? Did we say, this is the one where we talk about the pilot? It's ingenious.
It's baked right in.
Right, yeah. So we decided that we watched the episodes on our own, made our own notes, and a lot of the stuff that we're going to discuss is probably stuff you already know, in the sense of what they talk about in it, even just the little nuances, even bloopers or things that we see. And we're kind of going to separate those into their own little features as we go along. And we hope that this just evolves into something fun. But yeah, let's just jump right in. Like the first scene. So the thing that I noticed, and I don't know if it's just because I was overwatching, like now I'm being in analytical mode, but I was like, ooh, the first scene is like just a pan of New York City. And then I forget that Central Perk is like the first thing.
Yeah.
Like the logo of Central Perk on the window. And then all of a sudden they're in the coffee house. Already
You're in the coffee
visiting.
shop. Yep.
Yeah. I didn't realize how quick the scenes were right away. Like it's almost like 30 seconds of dialogue, boom, we're on to something else. New subject, scene change, come back. And it was almost Seinfeld-ish. You know what I mean? But it was only at the beginning. It was almost like, wow, we're jumping from one scene to another joke to another joke. And then it sort of settles in probably when Rachel walks into the coffee house.
That's probably the longest period of time that they spend sort of developing her character, but then also developing the other characters at the same time.
Right. And this is why I think this is interesting, is going back to see how they set these up. Because they wouldn't have known in season 5, this is how we want to build this character. Like the premise, and I think you brought this out in our pre-production meeting, that that what is the premise that they're trying to establish in this first episode? It's about their relationships, and it's not even about necessarily their friendship relationship. It was like how they deal with their own relationships, like their dating. I mean, specifically their dating or their marriage, really. You know, Ross. Well, does Ross come in first in the sense of relationship? No, Monica. The first scene, they're talking about who Monica's dating.
Yeah, like the third sentence is, well, if you're dating him, there's got to be something wrong with him. You know, from Joey. I mean, that's a paraphrase. But...
Right. I mean, they are establishing, obviously, that they know each other, and it's like they're already mocking Monica for her dating life.
Yeah.
Because then the next thing is Ross coming in with his annoying, hi. You know, I'm like... And it's funny because I feel like that is so Ross and establishes his personality. So it's funny in a way, but in the sense of like who he is, it actually annoys me. And
it does me too.
You know, and we're gonna totally flesh this out as we go along, because I want to talk about, you know, maybe one day we'll rank. Like, I know among our family and friends, we've talked about who do we like in order, and I want to discuss that at some point in some episode. But I know that you and I agree.
We do.
You and I agree that Ross he's the bottom of the list. If you like Ross, I'm so sorry. I mean, and it's Ross, not David Schwimmer. David Schwimmer is brilliant. Like, I feel like because he's this way and the way he portrays things, I think it's brilliant that he can act that way. And I don't think I saw that until I actually saw him in other things. Like, when I saw him act in other things, you just get used to him as Ross. So when you see him in other shows, it's like, oh my goodness, this guy has like breadth and depth to his acting. You know what I mean? He's not just Ross.
Annoying.
Right.
Which means he's a really good actor.
Exactly.
And that he took this like Ross character who is kind of annoying and needy and whiny.
Right. And he plays it so well. But in the sense, if you were going to pick the friends, I would not be Ross's friend.
No, I would not.
I wouldn't. It's just, it can't. So, okay, let's discuss this one other thing. This is a side note about the Friends, which I think this is a future discussion as well. But I think that people have to know, especially if you're a Friends fan, that there's a piece of every friend in each of us. You know, we're not all exactly one of the friends, but there's definitely something you can identify with each friend. When you think about personalities and personality profiles, like I think I've told you this before, I love taking personality profile tests. And it's not for judgment reasons. We use them for work, and we use them for how to work better with other people or how to have a relationship with other people. And so that's why I enjoy them. So it's funny that in Friends, even though they have their own personality, you know, Monica the perfectionist, Ross whiny and kind of needy all the time, Joey the player, you know, Phoebe the what's the hippie. You know what I mean? Like, they all have their own character, but there's something about each of them that we can identify, and that's probably why I love the show.
I think it is interesting that it's an interesting mixture, because if they didn't have Ross in the show, I don't think it would be as great as it is, even though he's not my favorite storyline. He's not my favorite character, but
no, but he contributes.
Some of the funny things, some of the things that I think are the funniest in the show have a little bit of Ross in them.
Yep. Yeah.
Like, it is funny that he walks in and he's like, hi.
Right.
That's just funny because you know somebody who's like that.
Oh, yeah.
These characters are very relatable. I love how things are kind of left out in the open, and you don't really, they're open-ended jokes.
Yeah.
Where you don't really know what they're looking at. You don't really know what they're talking about, but your mind finishes the sentence and fills in the gaps with whatever is funniest to you.
Right.
These aren't like fed to you funny story, funny jokes. It's whatever is funny to you. They allow you to fill in that blank, which makes it even better.
And I think that's the brilliance of the writing is there
Mm-hmm.
are stuff that we all identify with specifically. And then there's the broad things that you can make it whatever you want and it's still funny. If I told you my version, I'd hope you think it's funny. And if you told me yours, I would think it equally funny. And it could be
Right.
two totally different things. And I think that's what's
Mm-hmm.
just great about it. Okay, so let's get back to the episode. And they're discussing, Ross comes in, he's like, hi. They obviously know something's wrong in the marriage because he then tells them, Carol's leaving and whatever. And Joey says, I don't know why this caught me funny this time, but Joey says, so how did you not know that Carol was a lesbian? And he's like, she didn't know. How should I know? And so funny. So here's the first. Should we do this as like one of the little culture moments? Because
Sure,
it is a cultural aspect about how people talked about gay and
Mm-hmm.
lesbians in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless of where you fall on this argument, it doesn't matter. No judgment. But, I mean, like the audience. But I mean, like, sorry. But they're treating it how people viewed it back then.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like Joey asking that question, how do you not know? I mean, there's people who don't know, which still boggles my mind. There's people who kept it a secret, but there's probably some people who really didn't know. And so it's funny to look back then, and that was just like this transitionary time. And I feel like even Friends, okay, one of two things. Friends was either ahead of their time because they were trying to address these issues, or I don't want to necessarily speak for you, but only because we've known each other forever. We come from a background where that type of stuff we didn't accept until later. I mean, not, or acknowledge or accept, however you feel, where it's the religious aspect that we just didn't look at that. So we didn't think of it in that way. So more so the world was a step ahead of us. Friends may have been even a step ahead of them. Sort of like to get this conversation going. And I know we'll talk about these type of cultural things moving on, hopefully in future episodes, because it's funny. Like, there's things that they say in this show that I'm like, you can't say that now. That you'd never write that into a show now.
Right? Yes.
But yeah, so anyway, that was a funny thing to me about just Joey asking Ross that. And then another thing, and you asked me this, why are they watching Spanish TV novellas? Like, why was that a thing? Like, I think it was funny what they were doing, but like, did they consciously say, let's just turn on, Telemundo and be like, let's watch a soap? Because it was interesting what they were saying, but it's still like, why? Because we brought up the one where, in the future episode with Marcel. Yes. They accidentally watch. Mm-hmm. Actually, they're probably watching a English show, and the secondary audio came on with the translations. Yes. Because I don't even know if it was a Spanish show.
And they're all really annoyed because Marcel did something to the remote control or whatever.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I wish I knew what they were saying. I wish I had a Spanish-speaking friend who could say
translate what the actual thing was saying. But it was funny to just watch them, and they were like, she should not be wearing those pants.
Yeah. And if I don't hold my head like this.
Right.
It's so silly.
Let's get into the section where we're going to talk about food in Friends. And we haven't fully decided on it. I think we're debating on whether to call it sangria.
Wait, you
say it. You're more perfect at this. You say the way that
sangria. I'll make sangria.
Yeah.
Sangria. I could make sangria.
You know what's funny? I kind of want to just make it that. The other thing we were talking about was the hummus, and
I got the hummus.
Right. And maybe that'll be part of the, the sound blurb when we get this all sound blurbed. We'll do the sangria thing and when Phoebe says the hummus. Right? It's Phoebe?
Yeah, it's Phoebe.
Yeah.
It's the one where no one's ready.
Yeah, exactly. When they accidentally get it on her dress and she puts on that giant Christmas bow. So back to what we were talking about. We're going to discuss food on Friends. And to give credit to that, Kristi, you found an article I think it was on Vulture.
Yes.
Vulture.com. I'm trying to find it. Yes, 152 meals shared between friends. So total credit to the 2014 article on Vulture that talks about someone sat down and tried to write down every meal in every episode. Here's the ironic thing. Why don't you tell us what the ironic thing about it is in episode 1?
So, in season 1, episode 1, the only food that they wrote down is pho. And apparently that's what Monica and Paul, the wine guy, are eating. That is not what they are eating.
They're totally not eating that.
They are in a Japanese restaurant from the looks of it.
Right.
Drinking probably green tea.
Right.
And probably eating
Paul was having
lo mein.
noodles.
Right.
I mean, she even says it. Monica even says it. And I think you did point out that it was a Japanese restaurant because I think in another scene change, a server walks by and she's definitely in Japanese garb. And that's where I thought, this is definitely Japanese. I mean, and pho is so specific. It's so specifically Vietnamese that why would, no offense to Vulture, I gave you credit for reusing your article, but really, episode 1, you messed up pho already? Like, what the pho? So here's the funny thing, though. The reason I brought this up was in that scene when they're watching the telenovela, there is so much Mello Yello on that table.
I know.
Like, it's one thing to have, like, a can or two, but there's 4 cans.
Yeah.
And I don't even know, was it product placement back in the day, but it was clearly, like, you can tell it was Mello Yello sitting on the table.
Yes. There are a couple of things in this episode that are very clearly, not disguised in any kind of way.
Yeah. What's the other thing?
Mello Yello is interesting, though. The reason why it's interesting is this is a silly story, but when I was a kid, my dad's thing was to buy us a can of soda. When we'd stop at the store, he would bring my brother and I out cans of soda. Well, his go-to was always Jolt.
Oh, yeah.
Which is crazy to
Right.
give a
kid, right.
a 9-year-old and her 6-year-old brother. And my mom always was like, Eric, stop buying those kids Jolt. So one day my dad came out with Mello Yello and he was like, here guys, it's Mello Yello. It's so much better than Jolt. My mom's like, oh, that's nice, Eric. Nice job. But then I didn't realize that it's actually a highly caffeinated citrus beverage. I mean, like Mountain Dew.
I was just going to say, wasn't a Mountain Dew competitor?
I guess so, but I didn't know that.
Back in the day anyway. But that's
what
funny
is up
that
with my dad and these
went from Jolt,
drinks?
right? He went from Jolt to Mello Yello. I'm wondering when Mountain Dew was brought to you guys. I mean, that's almost like the equivalent of like, let's buy the kids Red Bull.
Right. Or Monster.
Or Monster.
Have a
right.
Monster, honey.
In my mind, I mean, I don't want to call us like health buffs, but we're health conscious. Like, we know what's going on. That it's funny for me to even think someone would get a kid under 13 any one of those drinks. That just makes me, I don't know. It's just funny.
I vividly remember my childhood though. So maybe the caffeine really gave me the push I needed to remember. I got a lot done all the time.
Funny. What was the other food thing that you said was pretty blatant?
Adler beer.
I don't know if I even know what that is.
Adler beer. I don't really know much about it, but I know that it is a real beer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one where Ross says he walks in with the purple can and he's just kind of like looking at it. He's like, she always drank it out of the can.
Oh,
because it was
I should have known.
Beer.
See, that's, oh my goodness. See, that's another thing. So I can write these down. It's the whole stereotype. I should have known because she was drinking beer. Oh my goodness. And it's funny, I forgot about that. I did see that. Because all I could think of at that scene was, oh, here goes Ross again with his whiny, it's a beer. I'm like, for real. Like,
but he's a good setup. Like, he sets up these
so
funny zingers for other people. Which is kind of cool.
Because Joey was all over that right away.
Let's rewind for just 1 second, though.
Yes.
To back when Joey says, you mean you didn't know she was a lesbian? And he's like, she didn't know. How could I know? And then Chandler says, sometimes I wish I was a lesbian.
And then he's like, Didn't he say something like, did I say that out loud?
Yes. I love what they did for Chandler. And,
Yes.
you know, we were talking about our favorite characters and stuff, and it's going to
Right.
be pretty obvious, I think.
Yeah.
Chandler is my favorite.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yes, number one. I don't know if it's his vulnerability or
Right.
like I just feel like he's just this guy who's trying to make his way.
Yeah.
He's the underdog. I
Right.
don't know.
Right. I mean,
I
the
love
poor
Chandler.
guy. I mean, Monica even says this at some point where she's just like, wow, they really didn't give you a chance.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you said, this is set up for his character when he says out loud, I wish I was a lesbian, which is hilarious to me. Do all those flips in your head of like, okay, but you are a male who struggles with the label of thinking people that you have this quality that people think that you're gay, but then you are straight, but you want to be a lesbian. So it's just all these layers where it's like, but you kind of are. You know what I mean? In the sense of like, you're not the butchiest of men, but you are a straight man who likes women. So you kind of are. But it's
so
just
funny.
the setup because isn't it even at the end? What was the thing about Liza Minnelli?
Yes, when he had the dream. He had a dream. He's like, so I'm in Vegas and I'm Liza Minnelli. Because it's like the end credits where they're just like, they've set up this poor guy.
Right.
He's like, kids, new dream. I'm in Las Vegas. And then he goes, okay, so I'm in Las Vegas. I'm Liza Minnelli. Like this poor guy
Right.
is.
You wonder how the writers even, like, we knew we were going to write him this way.
Mm-hmm.
And there was only 2 or 3 things that already gave you the clue of where this character was going to go.
Well,
you know?
I read something that said that when Lisa Kudrow read the script the first time, she thought that Chandler was gay.
Wow.
I read that somewhere and I wish I could tell you where, but I read that, yeah, she thought that the Chandler character was
And
gay.
you know what's funny? They don't necessarily establish that he isn't
Mm-mm.
in the
No,
first
not
episode.
At all. Mm-mm.
Wow.
No, he's just kind of unlucky at love and wishes he was a lesbian.
Right. right.
You know?
Oh my word. That's
He
right.
thinks that a date is going out to dinner and not having sex.
Right.
Aw.
Let's talk about a little bit. I had a note here about the apartment.
Yeah.
Like, we only see Central Perk. Oh, we actually see Ross's apartment, but Monica's apartment really is like the home base
Yes.
of everything. Central Park obviously is another character in the show, but first of all, I noticed right away, I was like, whoa, that window is huge.
Yeah.
And they didn't change it in the sense of like it's always been that big window.
Yes.
And I think it's interesting that when they based the show on that building, that window from the exterior shot, that window's there. So then when they obviously have to build the set in Hollywood or whatever, they staged this window.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this isn't a unique apartment, first of all. Not everyone has the balcony.
No. And it's gigantic
Right.
by New York standards.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Right.
Mhm.
2 bedrooms, a living room, and a kitchen. And so, like, how much did this apartment cost?
Yeah, there's no way.
Yeah.
And she's subletting it?
From her, it was under her Nana's name or her grandma's name. I can't remember
Right.
which side. But yeah, it was definitely sublet. Did she sublet the whole time? Is this the Nana that passed away, though?
I don't know.
It's like, we'll dig into that,
That's
I
one
guess,
of my
when we get
favorite-
there.
That's one of my favorite episodes, too.
But yeah, the apartment's huge. The apartment is purple. And if we want to go to, so we're going to call this other section called Pulling a Monica.
This was just in case you pulled a Monica. You promised Dr. Weinberg you'd never use that phrase.
Which is where we're going to look at whether it's like not necessarily bloopers, because not that we see mistakes of acting, but stuff that you're like, oh, wait, why is that out of place? This one I noticed first in the apartment. There's a radiator next to the front door of the apartment, like to the entryway to the apartment. And it's funny because they're playing with camera angles and all, but all of a sudden you see a radiator next to the front door, and you're like, oh, I never saw that before, and I don't think I ever saw it again. So I purposely am now watching for the radiator that I know is by the back window. You know, the window where they crawl out to the balcony?
Yeah.
By the back closet door. There's a radiator there later because that's where Joey turns the knob. They try to get Trigger to come fix it. And Joey's like, oh, there's a second knob underneath, and he fixes it. There's a radiator there. That radiator is not there in the pilot episode. It is at the front door.
Interesting.
And I was like, okay, well, I mean, I'm not making fun of it. It's just like you figure out the set.
Yeah, right.
But the other thing about the apartment is those rafters. I don't know if that's what you call, but you know, those wooden, it's sort of like a room separator. It's the same one where, you know, when Monica was tossing Ben up in the air and he hits his head on that.
Yes.
That is there for that. That is there for this first episode. And now this is something I guess we can watch for. Not that it's that much of a focus, but I know in the episode, one of the Thanksgiving episodes, I thought Ross and Brad Pitt are also leaning against that. And I don't remember if that's part of the rafters. But later on, in later episodes, there is no wooden rafter. Like, it's weird that was even built in there as a room separator.
I think I read about that as well, but
Oh, yeah?
I don't remember. I should have read it more. I didn't.
Oh, we can find that. We can find that. We can talk about it when we get to the episode where Ben hits his head.
Monica Bang.
Yes. But then at the end of the episode, when Ross is leaving the apartment, there is now a desk there next to the front rafter of the apartment. There's a desk in there. It's almost like another storage thing where Monica stores books, but you could tell she sits and probably writes there. But I don't remember that desk being there when Paul arrives, Paul the wine guy, who we'll talk about. He arrives to pick up Monica, and they go out, and they move the kitchen table to sort of eavesdrop. That little desk is not there, unless I missed it. I didn't rewind and watch, but I was just like, wait a minute. If they had enough room to move the kitchen table, that desk would not have been there, which is a weird place to stick a desk anyway.
I think that, because I was wondering about this too, because there seem to be so many inconsistencies with the set at Friends, you know, like somebody's sitting here and then all of a sudden they're sitting on the other, like there's one with like a ghost Phoebe in the first episode too. And so there are all these little bits that probably back in 1992, 93.
Yeah.
They didn't ever think that people would binge watch. I think probably the whole concept of there being an ability to binge watch. I think that people, thought that, you know, this is just going to be on TV. You can't record it. You can't, you know, like you're just going to have to watch it and they won't catch any of this. So don't worry about it.
Oh,
it's not
yeah,
a big
exactly.
deal.
Especially like in the 60s, like the sitcoms, like an I Love Lucy or, you know, My Three Sons. Why am I pulling those? Anyway. I couldn't Leave It to Beaver. I wanted to say Leave It to Beaver and My Three Sons came out. Like I Love Lucy
Monsters.
for sure. Yeah, right.
Monsters.
And you never thought that these would live on because you just
right.
happened to catch it. And even if they knew, obviously they knew syndication existed, but even then you were going to watch it on another channel later.
Right. And you wouldn't have the ability to pause, rewind, fast forward, review it again. And like the regular viewer would just see it one time and go, that was weird. Okay. And then move on and fixate on the plot of the story again.
Because on one hand, okay, it's the pilot. Anything can change from the pilot. But on the other hand, that's a totally valid point to be like, well, no one's going to notice. Well, we're going to pause right here, but here's what you'll hear next time on The One with a Podcast.
Monica was not invited to Rachel's wedding.
You've been best friends through high school. You went to prom together. What happened between college graduation and walking into the coffee house? That's coming up, and be sure to check us out on social media. Look us up at The One With A Podcast or visit theonewithapodcast.com. That's a podcast, theonewithapodcast.com. And join us again next time.